Okay, we are live on Starfleet Boy episode 2. Today we're going to have an informal and casual discussion about episode 2 of Star Trek The Next Generation, known as The Naked Now. And I'll be joined by my esteemed colleague sitting over there on the Cardassian side of space, Gul Scott. Hello,
Hello,
Gul.
SB. Gold Scott here, live from Terok Nor.
Excellent. I just want to say that we attempted communications earlier in the day, but there was some kind of technical difficulty, I believe, on the Terok Nor side. But obviously, I'm not. I'm open to it being on our side here in the Federation. But
I agree with you. I think there may have been some paw wraiths that were interfering with my transmission.
Either way, we're back now, and all systems seem to be working well. We have a really strong subspace communication link, and we're gonna start our discussion. Before that, I've prepared a little statement, Goldu Scott.
Yes.
Because this particular episode, The Naked Now, is extremely sexy. The first time I saw it was with my parents when I was 9 years old. I think that's around the age 9 or 10. I think it aired in 87 or 88. 87, right? That's when Next Gen.
October 5th, 1987 is when this particular episode aired.
I love you. Thank you for knowing that. Anyways, what I do remember myself personally is that it was very awkward watching with my mom and dad that first time.
I don't think I watched with my mom and dad. This was I watched a lot of shows by myself. I was 9 at the time, and I have very clear memories of one specific scene in this show.
Do you want to talk about that now, or do you want?
Yeah, we'll get to that later.
Okay, well, you're gonna remember that. But the disclaimer I have is, if you're a young person and you're watching this, and what I mean by young is, I guess, under the age of 13, 14, right?
Yeah, it's a PG-13 show, I would say.
13 show. We're going to be talking, frankly, about some of the sexual aspects. So if you get embarrassed by sex, please tune out right now. Close your browser. This is going to be tame by societal standards, but we just want to put that disclaimer out there. I mean, there's videos of twerking on YouTube, right?
There's videos of much worse than whatever two nerds talking about Star Trek is about to be like.
All right. Yeah. So now that we got my little friendly neighborhood disclaimer out of the way, we have decided together, in celebration of this episode, since the main theme involves the crew, the main plot story device involves the crew becoming intoxicated by a virus, we ourselves are going to be intoxicated slightly, maybe.
Yes. We are not naming the brands because nobody has paid us to name their brand of alcohol, but I'm drinking a beer beverage and you're drinking what?
A wine beverage. So cheers. Cheers to you and the hopeful future union between the Cardassian Empire and the United Federation of Planets.
We'll see what happens.
All right.
One quick thing before you jump into your episode summary, I do want to point out, although this is, a lot of people consider this episode 2, technically this is considered episode 3. Encounter at Farpoint is considered episodes 1 and 2.
Thank you for clarifying that, and that is important.
Yeah, because we may get angry comments from people if we refer to it as episode 2, so I just want to sort of preemptively, let those people know that we are as knowledgeable in this as you. You don't need to attack us.
And I'm gonna say, if you want to attack us, feel free. We're ready for that too.
Cheers.
Because I know, Scott, that I'm going. That reminds me. Thank you, Scott.
Yes.
Last episode, there were a few things that came to my attention that may have been incorrect. One is on Netflix, Star Trek The Next Generation is remastered after all. So I think they did a really good job because when I was watching it, to describe how I'm viewing it, I probably haven't seen many of these episodes since I was a teenager, and I'm 38 now. so in like my teenage, in memory, we all know now how imperfect memory actually is. The effects were great at the time, so when I was watching it, I was like, these are the same effects. But upon closer examination, when I watched this episode, I did now see that there are things that are clearer, sharper, and even like planets, the clouds are moving a little differently, and the rendering is just like a little bit better. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, they used actual models for the remaster. Is that right, Scott? Do you know?
I don't know if they used actual models or if I really don't know the remastering process. But I do know that it looks incredible. And my favorite part is during the opening credits when, right after it says, Will Wheaton as Wesley Crusher, you see this shot of the Enterprise coming in. And in the little window, I think that's 10 forward, you can actually see people walking around, and, it's that detailed.
Wow, it wouldn't be 10 forward if it's the back shot, but it's probably some observation deck or something.
Like
that's
the top of the saucer section, but looking backwards.
I watch on a little iPad. I have to upgrade my viewing experience.
Oh, yes, definitely, yes. Yeah. I viewed this on a 46-inch flat screen television in high definition technology.
Oh, it sounds like Cardassian's way better than Earth here. It's like Karak Nor, anyways. No. So that was one thing. So Netflix is offering a better experience, guys. And also the other thing was I did say something like Deneb 2, and I believe the name of the planet, as it was pointed out, is actually Deneb 4.
Uh-oh.
So I just want you to know that I'll never get those details right. That's what I rely on everyone out there, and especially my colleagues, my much more knowledgeable and generous colleagues such as Galdu Scott and the Doctor now as well.
I would not have known that either.
Good. So going back to The Naked Now, episode 3 actually, but the second story of the new series, we start out with a distress call from a ship called the Tsiolkovsky, a really nice little ship when they reveal it, because for Star Trek fans, we know it as also the USS Grissom from Star Trek 3, and I know that the class is the Oberth class, which I always thought was interesting. A little tidbit of trivia, I don't know much about him except that a quick glance at Tsiolkovsky, the name of the ship is, he was a Russian scientist who was instrumental in rocketry and the space program, and just rocketry in general, and is considered one of 4 or 5 really influential individuals around the Earth from all nations who helped the space program basically be what it is today. In general, whether you think of the United States space program or the Russian space program, or hopefully eventually a world space program, kind of like in Star Trek, this person will go down in history. And I think it's cool that Star Trek honored him by naming a ship after him. And it's even cooler that normally the ships are designated USS, but the Tsiolkovsky is called the SS Tsiolkovsky, which is more a designation that you would find in Russia.
And this was made when the Cold War was still going on. So
yeah, interesting point as well. The Cold War was still going on at the time of
Tsiolkovsky.
So to the Tsiolkovsky, I like that we're gonna drink and cheers at things. It's pretty awesome. So they discover, so they find this. They answer this distress signal, and they come upon the ship, and the ship was a research vessel that was studying a star that is going to go nova. This is the kind of stuff we do in Star Trek and Starfleet. It's like, it's not just cowboys in space and shoot 'em ups. There's a lot of scientific discovery going on, much like real life. I mean, there's scientists that are constantly going to interesting and dangerous places sometimes. Anyhow, they get a distress signal, and when they arrive, they see the ship is kind of just, derelict, and they get a strange, that when they attempt to communicate with the ship, they get a strange response, and then all of a sudden you hear a dramatic sound like an explosion, and sure enough, the crew has now somehow released a hatch into outer space, and everyone who was left on board alive has now been sucked out into the vacuum of space.
Actually, been blown out.
Right. Well, so yeah. I would love to redo that discussion that we had earlier. So apparently there's some innuendo. So like we said, this is a very sexy episode of Star Trek.
Very sexy.
Very sexy. And it starts out, so in a scene that comes up, after the blowout, the crew decide to go and investigate on the ship, and they find that there's a crazy rager or kegger that's been going on. There's like empty glasses of alcohol on the floor, party favors, God knows what.
There's naked frozen people like in mid-orgy.
There's naked frozen people. Apparently, whatever was happening to the crew, one of the indicators that something was wrong is that everyone became extremely hot and had to undress. And like they find out that and they're all uninhibited and having, it seems like they're having orgies and drinking, and it's like a bacchanalia basically on the ship is what the evidence shows. And so then, for those of you who have watched, for those of us who watched the original series episode, The Naked Time, which this episode is a homage and sequel to.
Not a reboot, though.
Not a reboot, but an homage and a sequel. For those of us who know that, this episode is really interesting because we understand certain plot devices. For example, when we know that it's a contagion, first of all, like some kind of virus, and interestingly enough, it's passed through a sound. Or at least there's always a sound, including in the episode, a chime sound. So if you touch an infected person, you in actual real life, if you ever got this thing, you might hear a chime out of nowhere. You'll be like, oh.
Anytime you hear a chime, you may want to go to a doctor.
To a doctor right away. It's like anyways,
your doctor.
The contagion that it just causes you to get more and more intoxicated, or rather the symptoms are the same as getting really wasted. And if you've ever been drunk or have gotten really wasted, you know that like you pretty much are kind of in and out of control of yourself. Your consciousness kind of like goes to these like far out places, and in the meantime you're on top of bar stools dancing or making out with total strangers, or doing, I don't know, all kinds of things.
Or recording a show on YouTube.
Right, exactly. So here's that. Anyway, so this disease now is brought aboard the Enterprise, and it starts infecting people. And I think the first person to be infected was Geordi.
Yes, he caught the falling woman. All the white stuff got on him, and that's how he got infected. And
we heard that chime when he got infected, so that's how we knew.
Yeah, and I feel like this is a very Geordi-centric episode. We really get the most story is sort of devoted to him and his longing to see like everyone else does. And I feel like if there's one central character, he's the one.
I agree with that. It's a nice highlight on his character, and funny enough, he's the first one to show symptoms, and he's walking around and infecting people left and right, and we hear this chime going off every time it happens, and so it kind of interesting way to illustrate how viruses or contagions or whatever can spread. Very good way of showing it on screen. So this disease is now brought aboard the Enterprise, and then we start having a few interesting complications. At first, it's very harmless and humorous. I think some of the funniest things are Tasha.
It's 2 o'clock.
Tasha, oh, I hate that.
What was that?
It's the ship's computer. It says it gives me the time. It says it's 2.
So it's 2:00 at Starfleet headquarters, everyone.
Yeah, I don't know how to control that, but I have to figure out how to shut that off. I thought do not disturb would.
It's 5:00 on Terok Nor.
It's 5:00 somewhere. And now we have to drink.
Yes, cheers.
So I think Tasha is the next person to become infected.
Yeah, well, Geordi tries to seduce her, and he's touching her face.
That's right.
And she, denies his advances. But that is how she becomes infected.
He gets infected as well. And then, so anyways, as more and more people get infected, there's a lot of humor in this episode. Tasha becomes kind of like a minx, basically. I mean, her sex drive goes into overload, and she's just ready for that. But another interesting thing happens. Young Wesley Crusher becomes infected, and I thought at the time when I first saw this, I was like I remember being really like just annoyed that Wesley was infected and stuff like that. And I remember seeing it again as a teenager, and I really wasn't fond of the character's arrogance, I guess.
Were you a Wesley hater?
I was in the beginning. I actually quickly shed that hatred. Like I think by mid-season, I was on the Wesley camp again. But I remember being really annoyed. When I saw it this time, I actually was endeared. I thought it was endearing.
I like any good Wesley episode is at the top of my list. And that sweater, the sweater he's wearing in this is fantastic. That's on my notes. I had made a note about Wesley's sweater here. We'll get back to that later.
Awesome. There's a lot of Wesley sweater conversations we can have as we go through the seasons, but I also thought some interesting things were like I didn't expect Data to become infected, and he seems to get infected as well. But he does describe some of his anatomy, which is interesting. He in one scene where he's trying to justify. I think Picard questions like, "Why are you infected? Because you're an android, right?" And he's like, "Well, I have a nutrient-rich fluid that runs through my body," and it kind of makes sense. It's interesting. It's like, of course, he has like oil, or some kind of lubricant.
I don't know. I'm not sure I bought that because maybe it makes sense right now in the timeline of the show, just coming out. But in later years, we see the insides of Data, and it's very much mechanical. And I don't know that I buy that. Something that affects biological entities would affect him in the same way.
I think for this this show actually doesn't go too far. It could have gone in that direction, I think, later, where they reveal that he has biological components. But I kind of like that he views himself. I don't think these are biological components. I think there's fluid that needs to flow through to like lubricate, servos and things like that. And while it's a contained system, and we don't see like fluid popping out of him when they remove his arm or he gets injured, it's possible that it does exist. And in this moment, he's justifying his similarity to humanity by saying, well, I can get infected by this thing too. But I will agree with you that like he should, by all intents and purposes, he shouldn't be infected. I mean, a virus in his system, there should be like nano robots that go in and just zap the shit out of it, like with phasers. So, yeah, you're absolutely right. But I see how Data could try to, maybe Data doesn't realize it, but he might have a subroutine or an algorithm that forces him to like have a contact high. Dr. Student.
Talk about that. I go with it. I mean, it's a very short part of the episode. It's pretty much the last 5 minutes, but
regardless, they do inoculate him, and he seems to get better at the end. So there's a weird thing going on there, but like that is an interesting incongruity or anomaly, or just something to talk about further in another discussion. But yeah, he seems to be affected by this thing too. So this contagion doesn't just work on human physiology, but apparently it can work on androids and any other beings. Which, a little side question for you. Do you notice that there's really, like, other than Worf, there's like a lack of aliens on Star Trek The Next Generation?
Yeah, well, especially in the early part, like
Yeah.
I watched Encounter at Farpoint also recently, and there is like one shot I think of a female Vulcan that you see,
Mm.
um, and maybe one or two other aliens in one of like the crowd shots. But yeah, they it's a very human crew, and they tell us, Troy is betazoid or half betazoid, but she looks the same as us, so.
Same as us. There are a lot of humanoids in our galaxy, apparently, and they do explain this in an interesting way. Later on, there's an episode that shows like that there's a common ancestor for all of the major life forms in our galaxy. Do you remember that episode with the found?
In TNG?
Sorry,
was it TNG episode?
Yeah, it's a TNG episode. I think it's season 6 or 7. It's really trippy. I'll try to remember the name of the episode, but it has to do with later on they nurture Picard's archaeological past, his interest in archaeology, and
I do remember that. And that's around the Darmok episode, right? Or
around that time, exactly. And so that might be one explanation, but I will say one thing. Just, I understand that technologically it may have been difficult to create a lot of different, at the time, as far as the production went, even though it was $1 million an episode or something like that. I do get that it's probably hard to like create interesting aliens for every, in the crew for every episode. So, that's something that hopefully now with CG and kind of like some of the advancements, the new Star Trek show that comes out in 2017 will feature a few more interesting aliens on board the ship.
Well, but they did have access to all the movie props and everything, and I think, as you mentioned, the Tsiolkovsky was used as another ship in Star Trek 3. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the sets and things were the same. So you would think they could use the masks or the costumes for, all the aliens and whatnot from the movies.
But even still, the films don't even have a variety of.
You're right. There really are just Klingons and Spock,
Romulans, and then there's the one scene in Star Trek 3 that has an alien, but he's still very humanoid. He has a very human face, even though he has like 3 lips and like something that looks like whiskers coming out of his ears.
Oh yeah, the cantina bar scene.
Yeah, where he's like, Genesis allowed is not his. Yeah. Is planet forbidden. But yeah, I feel the first time I felt like Star Trek actually delivered on what you see in comics and in the cartoon series. You do see a lot of interesting aliens in the cartoon series. So the first time I think Star Trek actually delivers on that is not until J.J. Abrams. You do see some wild looking aliens serving on board Enterprise ship, Starfleet ships in the first, in the Star Trek alternate universe movie.
I agree with that.
So I hope, and I think that's a direct result of technology access, like how technology is kind of advanced and makes it easier, because Star Trek's not a high budget production by some show standards. Like Game of Thrones, let's use that as an example, right? You have fucking dragons and ice warriors and like,
White Walkers,
yeah, and like, all kinds of interesting weird. Mm-hmm. But it's a lot.
I don't know if you talked about this last time, about TNG being the first show made specifically for syndication. That it wasn't even on a major network. This was at a time when you basically had CBS, NBC, and ABC. Fox, I don't think, was even around yet, or they were just about to come on the scene. And this was on like the UHF channels, if you're old enough to remember what those were, and it was not a given that anyone was ever going to watch this. So it was made on a very kind of low budget, just seat of their pants, not really sure if this was going to last more than 1 year.
And I think it's amazing that they pulled it off because it's a great show. So where they win, of course, is the writing. There's really good stories that are told throughout the show's history.
Especially Deep Space Nine as well.
Yeah.
Once you
Star Trek forever. So we go into an interesting set of circumstances where the show spends a good quality amount of time revealing interesting things. So that's something that I think that was very clever about making this the second story, is that by making the crew infected by this contagion that creates symptoms. The symptoms are that you are intoxicated and lose your inhibitions. It gives us all a real, as the audience, it gives us a great view into the inner psyche of each of our characters. We discover a lot about every character, except Worf, who stays immune to the condition throughout the whole episode. But we definitely get a lot of Worf development later on. But here we find out a lot about Tasha. It's the doctor at one point gets infected because Riker infects her, and Troy got infected, and she went straight to Riker to have sex. She's like kind of like, it's a very touching scene actually, because she comes to him and she's again overwhelmed by the emotions on the ship. She's like, everyone's just like coming out and letting go and like going crazy, and I'm feeling it, man. I'm in it.
I love when Troy is just like in full empath mode.
Yeah, so, she's like, yeah. I think it's wonderful. I have since met some interesting.
Are we going to talk about her hair at all in this episode?
I wish there was a way to show a picture of these things. We'll figure it out as
we need to get some, I don't know, special effects software or whatever the kids use to do that these days.
But yeah, her hair's out of control. Her whole outfit.
Which there's no way she could have done that herself. So the only conclusion you can draw is that there is some sort of hair salon on the Enterprise.
There is. Mr. Mott. Do you remember? Do you not remember?
You actually know this? This is a real thing?
Yeah, this is a real thing. So later seasons, I think I'm gonna guess season 6 is when you finally meet the hairdresser. There's a hair salon.
I don't remember that at all. There's probably a reason I don't remember that.
And I think his name is Mr. Mott. And he's definitely an alien.
Good memory.
What's that?
Good memory on that.
Oh, yeah, the weird things I remember, like Mr. Mott, But let me see if I can find him online. This is worth a check here. Mr. Mott. Oh, there he is. So and I guess that must be the real actor. So here we go. Memory Alpha is a great resource, by the way. Have you ever gone to Memory Alpha?
Hold on. Are they paying us to say this?
Oh, sorry. No, it's a Wikia. I think it's not for profit. It's fine.
Let's wait until somebody pays us. But yes, I do use Memory Alpha quite frequently. I am a fan.
Yeah, so Memory Alpha has a lot of great information about Star Trek. I'm gonna say they're a resource that we're happy to talk about openly.
And I also encourage them to pay us someday.
Thank you. You're awesome. So yeah, he's the barber on the Enterprise, and he's in an interesting plot device where Data needs a hairpiece. I think it was like a Romulan. The unification episode probably is where he was introduced.
So he's never met Picard.
Yeah, I always wondered how Picard keeps his hair so perfectly trim.
I assume that was one of Riker's duties.
Riker.
Number one. Bring the clippers.
It's time for my weekly haircut. Riker would do that. He would definitely do that. So Troy has an interesting line. What does she say to Commander Riker? It's something about, don't you want my mind to be in you, or something like, it's like some,
yeah, it's very provocative.
Yeah, it's very provocative and very interesting. Like, it gives you a hint that like Beta Z and is it Beta Z or Beta Zoan?
I switch back and forth and don't worry about it.
All right, thanks. So Beta Z intimacy is on a whole different level than human intimacy, because they also enter each other's minds during sexual encounters. So very, very cool little side tidbit there.
That doesn't sound appealing to me.
What's that?
It just doesn't sound appealing to me.
Really? You don't want Counselor Troy like rock your psyche and your body?
I don't know. I don't know that I want to know what is going on in Counselor Troy's head.
Good point, but I think she's a good girl. What's
she's
in
a
there?
girl who wants to be bad.
She wants to be bad, but she's a good girl. Nice. Everyone on Star Trek's a good person, except maybe Gul Scott. No, I'm just kidding. No, even Gul Scott. See, I think that's the.
I'm even redeemed by the end. By season 7, you were kind of with me. Season 7, excuse me, not DS9, Tarak Nor.
One of the best things about Star Trek is that it does really explore characters that you would normally, on face value, think of as bad or evil, and we see that a lot throughout Star Trek. But in this episode, we're just in the heads of our crew, and so everything's still okay. In fact, at one point, Picard's even like a little concerned, and he asks, well, if the sun were to supernova, what's the danger to us? And very confidently, this chief engineer, who I don't think we see her again, because
yes, McDougal,
yeah, she's just a one. Do we see her again? I don't remember.
One and done. I made a note of that and did some research. Sarah, she is the chief engineer in this episode only. We never see her again.
Oh, interesting. So, and I guess Geordi doesn't become chief engineer until season 2. Is that right?
I think it's the end of season 1.
Okay.
If I remember correctly. And that's around the same time. I think he's in the yellow uniform before the end of season 1 also.
All right. Well, very good. But yeah, so Geordi, interestingly enough, Geordi's a bridge crew member. He is a helmsman in the beginning.
And Worf is still in his red uniform as well. He hasn't changed to yellow yet either.
Right, exactly. His command. And Worf seems to be... What is his role exactly? Sometimes he's at the helm. Sometimes he's at the tactical station. Sometimes he's at the science station. I guess in the beginning, he's just kind of like a flex.
His role is to be in the shot. Just be in the shot. We just want your forehead in the shot. Remind people that this is like an outer space show.
Right, so it's still unclear as to what Geordi's and Worf's role are, but we do know that they are characters that are keepers. But unfortunately, the chief engineer is not, and probably because of this incident. I would imagine Picard runs a tough ship, and he's like, "You're incompetent. I'm sorry."
I mean, how old is Wesley in this? 15?
Yeah. So what happened? Well, let's talk about what happened real quick before we get into her. But she confidently says, "No problem, Captain Picard. If the sun supernovas, we can zap out of here in no time." Right? Isn't that what happens?
It was just that simple, Chief McDougal.
But little did she know that young Wesley would become intoxicated by the disease as well, and he decides that he. Oh, interesting. Also, the episode starts with Wesley playing with a miniature version of a tractor.
I love this. He fantasizes of the captain giving him orders. That's how he plays with himself. I am imagining the captain giving him orders. How, Mr. Crusher?
Do we know how old Wesley is at this point?
I believe it's 14 or 15.
Okay, that makes a little more sense.
Yeah.
So he has these like fantasies of the captain giving him orders, and he creates a little miniature tractor beam. And when he becomes intoxicated, he suddenly decides, oh, you know what? It's gonna be the best thing to do is to go to engineering and take over the fucking ship. I have a few qualms with this. The fact that it's so easy to take over the ship is a little disturbing.
Well, okay, are we supposed to believe that, or are we supposed to believe that Wesley is like a super genius?
I don't mind the super genius part. because I think that that's okay. I mean, like there's always like there are people like him, and most times they make a lot of mistakes, and I think Wesley does make a lot of mistakes. So I think that's okay. I do think it's weird that there is a scene later on. So you know, connecting this little plot point where he has this miniature version of a tractor beam that he also uses as a repulsor. He's configured it to be a repulsor. Well, later on during the most climactic and dramatic portion of the show, where this like asteroid is heading toward them, you know, we'll get into that a little bit more.
Was it an asteroid or was it a chunk of plasma
of the sun that explodes? The sun will explode, by the way, guys.
Spoiler alert: the sun explodes.
The sun explodes. This chunk of solar matter is heading straight toward them. And it looks like an asteroid. It's kind of like a rock, right? Which is kind of odd too. But I guess it super cools as it travels. So this like blob becomes more of a rock, right? You know, they need one more minute to like reconfigure the Enterprise, because there's a disaster that we'll talk about that happens that causes the Enterprise to be a sitting duck, and somehow Wesley is able to reroute the ship's power to turn the ship's tractor beam into a repulsor beam. And that I found a little unbelievable, that no adult, the chief engineer was baffled and didn't know how to do that. And Wesley, you know, as smart as he is, he's 14 years old, and, you know, this is an advanced starship. You're not just hiring an engineer that's working on this starship. I would imagine this is the flagship of the Federation. I would imagine that the engineer is probably the best in her class. Whatever you want to say about her. I'm okay with Wesley planting the seed of the idea, but I think that the engineer should have been capable of rerouting the ship's, you know, systems to do that. So I think if I were to revisit that episode and like think of what would be more realistic, I would have Wesley still plant the seed of it, but I would have a collaboration between the chief engineer and Wesley to make it happen. So that would.
It seems pretty silly that nobody in history of Starfleet up to this point had figured out that you could reverse a tractor beam to make a repulsor beam. Like that seems like one of the most basic things they would have realized right off the bat.
Right, but again, we forgive the writers. We forgive you, writers. We love you, because overall you got it right. I think, you know, the main point of this episode was to reveal something about these characters so that we, the audience, get a little more into them. It's like,
so do you feel like what they reveal in this episode really is true to all the characters, though? What we, you know, taking into account what we know about them down the line.
I would say so, because the Picard Crusher thing is an ongoing thing, you know, and so that comes out into the open when Dr. Crusher at one point tries to seduce Captain Picard, and then when everyone thinks they're gonna die because the solar matter is like headed toward them, what does Picard do? He doesn't go into his ready room and have a cup of Earl Grey and listen to classical music. He goes down to medical to talk to Beverly. You know, so I thought that was interesting, that like faced with this moment where everyone might die, which, by the way, interestingly enough, everyone else is focused on like a job to do on the Enterprise, and in this moment, Captain Picard is like, I don't have anything to do. I'm just gonna go down.
Picard is really weird in this episode. He's weird in general, like the whole first season.
But particularly strange here, where and again. What I like about this is that you don't know, you know, intoxication is a very interesting thing, because there is an element of unpredictability and surprise when one is intoxicated. Like, one is truly, in some sense, out of control.
Yeah, okay. What, like, for example, Jim, the character of Jim, I don't remember his last name, but he's the guy who works in engineering, who basically, when he gets drunk, apparently he wants to, be Wesley's sidekick?
Yeah, really strange.
That was weird. That was weird. I don't know. I didn't get what his motivation was.
And he goes to like some kind of childlike state. You know, he actually So here's why the Enterprise is in trouble. This is a good time to to talk about this. So Wesley goes into engineering, as we had said, and he begins to futz around and take command of the ship. And he just like encourages the chief engineer to just kind of hang out and play. And then the the assistant chief engineer, whatever he is, Jim, right?
Jim.
And he decides it'd be fun to take all the control chips out of the ship's computer, the engineering computer, and just start playing with them and tossing them in the air. Like, that's insane. This is another example of who are you letting onto your ship? Like, what are there psych exams that you have to pass to serve aboard? Like, shouldn't a psychiatrist have realized that Jim? I guess this is the.
Why wasn't Jim in like a regular Starfleet uniform?
Yeah, he's wearing some kind of jumpsuit.
What was he, some subcontractor or something, or where did he come from?
There are a lot of mysteries as to the workings of the Enterprise at this point. I think they didn't tighten that up until season 3 or season 4. But I think that goes back to Gene Roddenberry's ideas. What he was trying to convey more were some of these like concepts and humanist things. And I do remember reading as a kid, oftentimes the actors didn't really have the details of the technical aspects of the show till later. So like it would say, Riker says a line, and I think on the script it said something like techno jargon or techno babble that hadn't been written yet. Like, so there are scientific advisors on the show that read the scripts apparently and then go, oh yeah, this is how it works. You know what I mean?
They just fill in the blank. It's just like Mad Libs with scientific sounding words.
Yeah, it sounds like so. I think Michael Okuda and Denise Okuda, I think is his wife's name. They were more prominent in later seasons. I don't know how their involvement went in this first season, but Michael Okuda is responsible for a lot of the technical layout of the start. The stuff you never even see on screen. There was a really cool book that he published called the Star Trek: The Next Generation, the Technical Manual, which of course I purchased.
Oh, is that how you know exactly where 10 forward is located?
Oh yeah, all the things. I'm very intimate in my if to use a reference from another show, my Mind Palace has a very detailed schematic or representation of all the Enterprise.
So anytime you want, you can close your eyes and walk the halls of.
Yeah, walk the halls. I know how to get to
the Enterprise D, or do you have all the Enterprises in there?
My most prominent and solidified visualization would be of the Enterprise A, which is my favorite.
Oh,
I'm very intimate with the and in particular, the bridge I always pop in there is the Star Trek 6 bridge. So. That's like my favorite. That's the bomb.com bridge, as far as I'm concerned. And
I don't know. I like Sulu's. What's Sulu's ship? Is it the Excelsior?
Excelsior, yeah.
Yeah, Sulu's bridge in that movie is pretty cool too.
No, there's a lot of great bridges. But the Enterprise D is a close second, just because I spent so much time with the ship as a kid. Like watching Star Trek The Next Generation as it aired, and then just anytime there was a this is my whole free time as a child into my teenage years was okay, what's on TV? Oh look, it's Star Trek The Next Generation. So there are some episodes that I've seen many times, and so yeah, Enterprise D would be a good close second. And that's what's going on in my my little brain there. There's a detailed map of of the Enterprise. If you ever want to come into my mind, Goldie Scott, and share an experience on the Enterprise.
I would love to sometime, yeah.
I'll have to get some coaching from a Betazoidian or Betazoid person to teach me. So at one point, everyone's acting drunk, and in full effect, this assistant engineer pulls out all the command chips that are isolinear chips. And so we're faced with this dilemma. The Enterprise is a sitting duck. There's stellar matter heading for it, and we don't know what to do. And so the solve is twofold. the first solve is, well, Commander Data could easily put all the isolinear. The chief engineer says it's going to take me probably 2 to 3 hours to put these chips back in their proper places, and that's true. Like a human is going to have to look at this thing and go, holy shit, where does this piece go? There's like 900 of them on the floor, and it's like a puzzle. It's like you need time. They don't have this time. So wonderfully,
well, as Riker specifically tells them, Riker is able to look at the view screen and see this blob coming at them, and he is able to know right away that they have 8 or 9 minutes. Very specific about the amount of time I'm not sure how he knows that, but he knows it, and he's certain it's 8 or 9 minutes they have.
This is so fascinating because it's the second time Riker does this just by looking at the view screen. And in an encounter at Farpoint, he manually docks the star drive to the saucer section using a view screen. no other.
Well, he's Commander Riker. I mean, how do you think he became commander? Badass.
I wish I could just look at a view screen and know things like that. Things like that. It would be really wonderful. But you're right. And so the first solution is Commander Data, of course. He can just fucking, pardon my French, just, and then it's really beautifully done, the scene, actually, because they sped it up, I think, just right.
Yeah, the special effects were good.
Yeah, it looked real. Like, it didn't look like he was sped up. So it was done really well. But Data then expresses, if only we had one more minute. If only one more minute. And that's when
it was 9 or 10 minutes instead of 8 or 9.
8 or 9 minutes. So Wesley comes to the rescue, and the Enterprise is able to warp safely out of danger.
A millisecond before the blob would have hit them.
Yeah, and also beautifully, Dr. Crusher is able to realizes that the version of this contagion that the Enterprise D is experiencing is just slightly different from the one that the 1701 experienced. And there's a really kind of cute scene in medical when she's about to administer the updated inoculation to Geordi, where Picard says something to the effect of like, isn't it weird how fate has brought 2 enterprises across many decades to a similar scenario? And I kind of like that. I was like, that's a really cool philosophical and like kind of tie-in, and for me it did hit the right notes, the way it was acted and everything, and it kind of just like gave you this idea that yes, these people are the torchbearers at the moment, and I'm willing to follow you guys. Second episodes are always interesting, I think, in series, because it's like where you really realize, is this a show I'm going to want to watch? Am I going to watch episode 3? And I think that for a fan, for people who watched the original series and loved Star Trek at the time, not someone necessarily new to it, but for a fan, it was kind of like, okay, yeah, I dig what you're saying here. And I'm willing to go along for the ride. So also at the last moment, this cure is found, and Picard and Crusher are the second and third to be inoculated. And then Picard takes a hypo spray and goes and he inoculates everyone in engineering. And, ironically, Wesley is not inoculated, and he's such a boy genius that he's able to do all these things.
That was really weird. That was like waited an unnecessarily long time to inoculate Wesley.
I found something disturbing watching it. So when I first watched the show, I didn't know what it was like to get drunk. I mean, I was a 9-year-old kid, never had a beer, never had any alcohol. I came to drinking really late in life. Like 24 was my first beer at the age of 24. Yeah, interesting side tidbit here.
And you're only 25 now, so...
What's that? Oh, thank you. No, I'm 38. 38, everyone. But, it's the future. We live well into our hundreds, right? So I'm still a spring chicken. But having experienced drinking, watching this show now, as someone who has been intoxicated, I thought that Wesley's performance was a little strangely real. And I wonder if he method acted this and got drunk for it?
As someone who is currently intoxicated and also has experience being intoxicated, that would be amazing. I don't know if they would. Do you think that kind of thing would go on there? I feel like it was a very like.
Will Wheaton, if you ever see this, if this ever gets to you, Will Wheaton, somehow, we're very curious to know if you method acted through episode 3, and
I feel like maybe if it was Corey Feldman, I might, or even Corey Haim, possibly. But I felt like Will Wheaton was such a goody-goody, wasn't he?
I don't know that he, you know, I think that we ascribe character traits to the real personage, right? But we know
he just wasn't known for being, you know, certain of those child actors in that crowd were known for being drug addicts and things like that came out later in life. I don't think anything like that's ever come out about him. I think he was pretty clean cut for most.
That's fine. I agree with you 100%. But if I were a child, like not a child actor necessarily, but how old was he actually when you played the part? Like probably like 17 or 18, right?
No, I think he was younger than that. I think he was younger than that.
Let's find out. This will help us with our speculation here. So
look it up, because I think he was about the same age as the character. I'm going to guess that he was 15 at the time this was filmed.
Let's see.
That is my final answer, Regis.
So he's 43 today. He was born in 72. So he's a little older than we are.
So if he was born in 72, then in 87 he was 15.
So you were right. So he may not have, then yeah, regulations would not permit him to method act.
No.
That scene. But it is pretty good. I have to say, he's very convincing. And I think the sweat and then the manicness, like just the manicness of him, I feel like a 15-year-old would act that way. If I thought that was great. So good job, Louis.
He was probably, you know, I'm sure he had been around it at the very least.
Oh yeah, I know. We can all
Corey Feldman or Corey Haim.
I would say that if I were filming this episode again, let's say the new series decides to do, let's say they do, hey, let's do a naked episode.
Naked Again.
What's that? Naked Again. Naked Again. I would say that everyone should definitely get really drunk if they can, because I would love to see it like acted. That's an interesting concept. We should maybe do a drunk. Oh, that's what we're doing right now.
Yeah.
We're drinking while doing the show. So.
But yeah, but for me, I mean, I think the one thing that stands out that I remembered most from my childhood viewing, and that still stands out to me as the most important part of this show, is, you know, Data having sex. And he talks about the fact that he's been programmed in a wide range of techniques, and he is fully functional. I mean, so we're to believe that Dr. Soong programmed him to actually have intercourse with people, or he doesn't ever display sexual urges at any point that I remember.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting too. I do think Dr. Soong, having met Dr. Soong later on, is the kind of guy who would program an algorithm or a subroutine, if you will.
Yeah, he did look a little pervy.
He was. I mean, you know, he's Dr. Soong. If he modeled Data after himself, and so you can imagine like that. Data actually looks like Dr. Soong would have at whatever age Data is. So like, I know Data's only like 7 years old or 10 years old technically, right? But he's modeled after Dr. Soong at that age. So he's not a bad looking guy. I imagine he had quite a few interesting experiences. And when you meet Dr. Soong, you do get the impression that he is a dirty old man.
Oh yeah, no doubt. But his dream was for Data to someday achieve
humanity. Being human.
So I guess it does make sense that he would include that part of it in there.
Right, because that's a big part of what we are. Humans are very sexual creatures.
And fully functional.
And we are, hopefully.
I'm fully functional. Want to let everybody know.
I think philosophically it's very interesting because Tasha, so she kind of like, so Picard orders Data to go down and take Tasha to sickbay because when he well, actually, this is a really funny scene. So, so Data starts to recount a limerick he heard on the ship, and he says, "Sir, I heard this limerick, and it goes, there was a young lady from Venus whose body was shaped like a." And before he's able to finish the limerick, which we all know how it's going to end, Picard says, "Security to bridge!" That's like too far for Picard. He can't. He's like, "This is unbelievable. What's happening?" And then in that scene,
Venus has no place on the bridge of a starship.
It's true. And in that scene, which is delightful, Picard calls for security, and then Tasha answers, and she's like, "Hey, Jean-Luc, I'm a little busy right now." And she's got this very like flirty, sexy voice going on.
Yeah, who do you think she was with in there?
I don't know. I think she was just. Even though they were intoxicated, they don't specifically tell you what they're intoxicated with. But I can't help, though I don't have personal experience with ecstasy. I've been around people, and I can't help but say that like everyone seemed like they were what is it called, rolling balls, right? Like they were, or something like that.
I don't have a lot of or really any experience with ecstasy either, but
that's what ecstasy, like in my opinion, like I feel like that's the intoxication level that everyone's at here, because you feel this like apparently this like intense body high or body awareness and body experience, and so people describe being on ecstasy. It used to be used as a method to help couples. It was a couple therapy drug originally. Psychiatrists or psychologists were using it. Did you know that?
I did not know that. That's interesting.
So it makes a lot of sense because it apparently a side effect of ecstasy is like heightened sensuality, and that's the overall kind of like I think symptom. Like everyone just was so turned on and like uninhibited and sexual and sensual in this episode. So
but it's also interesting too, given Tasha, have we learned at this point that Tasha like basically grew up in like a Romulan prison camp where she was repeatedly raped and things like that? And
I don't recall if it was Romulan. I get the impression that she managed to escape the rape gangs, because in Encounter at Farpoint, she does mention, she's like, I figured out a way to like escape the rape gangs. But where she lived, there was a lot of anxiety because apparently there were rape gangs. She was on a very hostile and disturbed planet. That's where she grew up.
It's interesting that, I know that's a big part of her backstory, and that she's really the most like sexualized character in this episode, and that outfit she's wearing is amazing. And her hair with the little Superman curl, I'm not sure what that's all about, but I like it.
Tasha, hang on a second. I just noticed something. Can you say something for a second?
Say something for a second.
Is that the Queen knighting Sir Patrick Stewart hanging on your wall?
Yeah. Oh, indeed it is. Yes, that is.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Elizabeth II.
I am impressed. That is very cool. Thanks for including that on our show here.
Of course. Yeah.
Wow. I can't wait to see that in person when I visit you.
Someday, get over here to Bajor, man. We got it going on right next to the wormhole. There's lots of fun stuff. I'll take you to Quark's bar.
Wait, was the wormhole around in your occupation?
Oh, yeah, you're right. Sorry, this is terrible. Sorry. I'll take you to some interrogations. It'll be fun.
So going back to Tasha.
We'll do something fun. We'll figure it out.
We'll figure it out. I look forward to the day when we can come to an agreement about Bajor, because I don't think I can visit you till you give Bajor some relief from they feel like they're occupied right now.
Well, listen, it's not our fault.
So going back to Tasha for a moment, I think it kind of I think that overall she does display very little sexuality, and she's almost very like, she is the chief of security. She's very tough. She's very poised. One thing about her is she's hot-headed, for sure. She's hot-headed, brash. but that's, that is something that I think is an advantage. But this is the first time we see an intimate part of her, and I think it's because where she grew up that she doesn't like express that. Whereas Deanna Troi is sensual just all the time. There is a quality to her that where she's very free and liberal, and it's not disturbing or weird. It does, I mean, later it's not, but
well, I mean, she's disturbing and weird in a different way, but yes, she's also sensual. So she's got a,
right. So here it is that I think that's the part of the intoxication that's interesting, because this is out of character for her, and we see this side of her, and it's like, why wouldn't she want intimacy? And I think it's so beautiful that she and Data share this moment, but I think it's so tragic that when she's sober again, when she's cured, she says to Data, that never happened.
I can relate.
Oh, we all can relate.
But Data doesn't have any emotions at this point, so he's,
Yeah, but when that emotion chip activates, he remembers a joke from season 1, so he probably goes into his quarters and cries for no reason then, because he remembers this like happening.
No, but it is also I love how Data doesn't even really put up a fight. You would kind of expect him to be like, "Oh, hold on, what are you doing here?" But he's game. Like from the minute he walks in the door, she's like, "Are you fully functional?" He's like, "Why, yes."
And that's a wonderful example of how a character without emotions would respond to a situation like that. I mean, I think it is kind of interesting how Data does have this like kind of like different way of responding to things than humans with emotions would, and I love that they explore some of these aspects. But it's nice to also know that Data is, there are a lot of fangirls and fanboys out there. We're probably very pleased at the idea that now they can have fantasies about Data. This is before the age of slash fiction and like all these things, and so I remember as a teenager going, huh.
So if you were in this scenario, since you brought this up, if you're in the Enterprise in this scenario and you get hit with this virus, who's the person you're going after?
Oh, it's a great question. You have to answer this too. I honestly would make the same choice as Tasha, because Data would be the perfect lover. He'd just do whatever you want. He would just want to please you. That would be his objective. He's just like, okay, he has no real desire for sexual interaction. He's just kind of like, all right, well, I'm fully functional and I'm programmed in multiple techniques. So let's go on this ride. So Data would be my pick. What about you?
Yeah, I think I'm going to go with Tasha Yar.
Nice.
Yeah, I mean, just that outfit is incredible. That when I said earlier in the show, this is a great bringing it full circle kind of thing. My one memory of this show from childhood was that image, was, her in that outfit with the slicked back hair, and just a defining moment of my 9-year-old life.
And it shows the entire cast, I think, of this show is just very naturally attractive and different. There's a diverse kind of you have Captain Picard, who's very attractive. And it shows you that like these actors at the time were both physically and mentally attractive. And I think I like that about the episode too, is that it shows you that attractiveness doesn't necessarily come from physical looks or anything like that, but that you can express your sensuality and like be sensual in a way that suits who you are. And I love that about this episode. And I think I agree with you, though Starfleet Boy himself is homosexual, I can appreciate the beauty of women. And I have to say that the outfit she's wearing, the costume, is stunning. Like, it just shows it's not very racy by today's standards. I mean, like, we've seen worse on the Hollywood red carpet, but everything, any sexualized anatomy is covered up, but the reveal of her long torso.
Oh yeah.
And the shape, it's so beautiful, I thought, and I thought that was, I could see like young Scott being extremely intrigued by that.
Yeah. Even as a young Cardassian, I could appreciate human beauty.
Do you think society will always desire and have a place for sexuality in our entertainment?
Oh, of course. I mean, it goes. Do you ever watch Rome on HBO?
Wait, what's that?
Did you? What's going on over there?
Oh, I live in downtown. I live in downtown. Well, in our like pretend here, we're in downtown San Francisco, right? Because
in pretend we're back in pretend world.
Starfleet, that's where Starfleet headquarters is. But in reality, I live in downtown Seattle, and it's an exciting place.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff going on.
I just was worried that there was some sort of Romulan attack underway, or.
No, I have a direct line to Starfleet Command, and being an admiral, if I'm needed, I'd probably be instantly transported out of here to a command room.
Excellent.
Where that would be crazy.
But it wouldn't be you. Well, this will be a long discussion for another time about whether teleportation actually is you that comes out on the other end.
Ooh, very nice.
Yeah.
That is a very good discussion. So interestingly enough, the wrap of the episode, the moral, if you will, was very interesting to me. So everyone's cured, and we sit down on the bridge after this really awkward and weird experience, and Captain Picard makes a statement to Riker and Troy, which they don't take. Their expressions show an interesting way of how they took it. But he says something along the lines of, well, I do believe we can end up a fine crew if we avoid temptation. And he kind of lays the law down. He's like, all right, everyone, I understand there was this weird virus, but this is my ship.
Well, do you feel like also it's kind of like, because, he doesn't get with Dr. Crusher till like the movies, right? So it's...
what happens is at the end of the series, Dr. Crusher and they always have this tension. They don't ever really kind of get together.
I guess.
But in All Good Things, which is the end of the series, it's known that Dr. Crusher and Picard, in this weird kind of timeline, it's like an alternate timeline, if you will, Dr. Crusher and Captain Picard do get married, but then unfortunately, tragically, they get divorced as well.
That's right, and she's captain of some ship, right?
Of the Pasteur.
Yeah.
Yeah, which I think...
I guess my question is, though, as far as, Picard's final line about avoiding temptation and kind of giving a warning to the crew, is it kind of... I look at it as a case of, he realizes that he's not going to get laid, so he'll be damned if everyone else is getting laid and he's the only one who's not. He knows, he can't get with Beverly at that point.
I'm going to defend Picard on this one and go a different direction than you, because he's certainly capable of it. I mean, already... Let's just talk about Picard for a second here. We have the whole Crusher romance, unrequited romance, right? But then there's the episode that you really love with Commander Maddox, where Data, you remember Data's humanity?
Messer of the Man?
Yeah, and so the judge in that episode, there's something going on there.
Oh, yeah.
He's like really
Admiral later, too, in other episodes. Doesn't she come back like season 3?
Right, and then there's Vosh. Vosh, they've done it.
Is Vosh? Wait, is that Famke Janssen?
I don't remember. Is that Famke Janssen? Because
there's the Famke Janssen episode where sort of he falls in love with her, she falls in love with him. There's that romance too.
I am gonna be so embarrassed if I didn't know that Vosh is Famke Janssen. So apologies to you.
No, I don't know either. I don't know.
Let's find out who plays. Let's see, Famke Johnson, Star Trek. Let's see here.
I think there's all.
Oh, I know that episode. But yes, there's that episode. And then, Vosh, let me look her up and let's give credit to the actress.
Isn't there a Risa episode too where he goes on vacation to Risa and has a little fling with somebody?
Yeah, I guess so. So Vosh is an archaeologist. She's a human archaeologist, remember? And she's like, Q kind of introduces them, I think. And he must be doing this to distract Picard from his his mission. But Picard genuinely falls in love with her, and that's the weird episode. It must be the Risa episode or the Rigel episode, because Picard's wearing this like really revealing bathing suit.
Yes. Oh, that's it. Oh,
It's
I don't know when that episode is, but I want to be on that episode with you to discuss it.
Yeah, and so the actress who plays Vosh, great character, her name is Jennifer Hetrick. So yeah, good. Can't wait to get to that. Well, I'm gonna try to make it a point that we talk about all the romantic sexual episodes together. We'll try our best.
All right, I like that. I will be your romance and sex correspondent with all my vast history and experience in my life.
But to wrap up that point about Picard, I think what he's saying is that, like, to him, there's a degree of professionalism involved with being a Starfleet officer, and he doesn't want the crew to be tempted to be too familiar. And he's kind of laying down the law in that statement. And it's ironic. It's not ironic, sorry. It's interesting who he's saying it to. He's saying it to his first officer and to Counselor Troy. So he's almost kind of discouraging them.
Does he know that they have a past relationship at that point?
He's aware of it, and he's almost kind of like saying, hey guys, like, I don't want this ship to be about relationships, like intimate relationships. I want this ship to be about everyone having a professional relationship, and we're on a mission, you know. And that's how I interpreted that. And I think, like, you know, you could relate the command structure of a starship to an enterprise, if you will, such as a business or whatever. And that is something that, you know, in general, it's found that businesses that operate with too many intimate relationships between bosses and, you know, people in charge and their subordinates do suffer. At least it's a harder business to run than one.
I believe the place where you and I worked together, there were rules against that, weren't there?
Yes, Apple is much like Starfleet, I think.
Yeah. Without the cool spaceships.
Without the cool spaceships. Although it did feel, I often did go into my mind palace and pretend that I was on the bridge of the Enterprise when I was commanding the red zone, if you will.
And you fantasized that Picard was giving you orders?
No, I think I rather fantasized that I was Picard giving the orders. But still, whatever floats our individual boats, I suppose. Is there anything else we want to talk about this episode, or do you think we're good on episode 2?
We covered pretty much all the nonsense on my notepad here.
I thought this was another great discussion. I really had a lot of fun, and I look forward to more with you, Galdu Scott, and thank you.
Thank you, SB. Terra, we're out.
Signing off.